In today's video, we explore the haunting cost of human error in law enforcement, from a fiery training demo gone wrong to a misdirected tactical entry that left a young officer dead in Yonkers. These are not stories of shootouts or high-profile manhunts, but of quiet lapses, miscommunications, overlooked details, and tragic timing. It was June 21, 2016. The Las Vegas tarmac baked under brutal desert heat. Officer Trey Mullins, a 32-year-old safety instructor, stood beside a car fitted with cameras and sensors. What began as a routine training demonstration would soon descend into a nightmare that no one on the tarmac would ever forget. Trey was a former Army mechanic with deployments in Iraq. He'd transitioned to Las Vegas Metro Police with the same precision that kept him alive overseas. Colleagues described him as composed and humble, the kind of officer who de-escalated tense situations with quiet authority. 2 months earlier, he'd been promoted to instructor, charged with teaching officers how to survive high-speed pursuits where split-second decisions separate success from disaster. That afternoon, Trey volunteered to demonstrate a PIT maneuver, a high-speed technique used to spin out fleeing vehicles by striking their rear bumper, for the Community Police Expo. Families watched behind barriers as he climbed into the retro-fitted Crown Vic. No one realized the smallest oversight in setup would turn a crowd pleaser into a catastrophe. The department had modified the vehicle specifically for crash demonstrations, fuel cell relocated, fire suppression installed, extra insulation added. Temperatures hovered at 112 degrees Fahrenheit. Unknown to anyone present, a critical fuel cell seal had been improperly installed during maintenance 2 weeks earlier. At 3:15 p.m., cameras rolled as Trey began his third demonstration run. Spectators leaned forward, expecting another flawless pit. But on his final turn through the maneuver sequence, the front right tire suddenly delaminated mid-slide, rubber peeling away in an instant as heat and age finally gave out. The Crown Vic snapped sideways without warning, slamming into a concrete barrier at nearly 40 miles per hour. The impact tore into the chassis and ruptured the unsealed fuel cell, spraying gasoline beneath the car. Within 5 seconds, fire erupted, flames racing up through the undercarriage and swallowing the rear cabin in a flash. The GoPro mounted inside captured Trey's frantic struggle with his harness, arms thrashing as he tried to release the jammed buckle. But the crash had twisted the frame, and the belt wouldn't budge. Officers and bystanders rushed forward but were driven back by intense heat. The vehicle's fire suppression system failed to deploy, and despite a fire crew stationed nearby reaching the scene within 30 seconds, Trey had already succumbed to devastating burns and smoke inhalation. The investigation revealed negligence. The fuel cell's sealing checklist had been completely skipped. Trey's death devastated the local police community. At his funeral, over 100 people gathered. Officers in dress blues, former Army comrades, and community members who remembered his late-night patrols. His family received an undisclosed wrongful death settlement, but no payout could undo the silence left in his home. It was October 3, 2015. Dusk settled quickly over Yonkers, shadows spreading across Warburton Avenue. Officer Leanne Mercado adjusted her radio earpiece and scanned the back door of the suspected dealer's unit, only knowing that it was supposed to be a simple drug raid. Leanne was 27, earning her place through intellect and grit. She'd once taught women's self-defense classes before joining the force. Colleagues respected her razor-sharp focus and tactical precision. Only 2 women served on the precinct's tactical entry unit. Mercado had outthought her way through every scenario to earn her spot. Her supervisors often said you could trust the flank completely when Leanne was covering it. No one needed to look back. That Saturday evening, her unit was executing a warrant on a fentanyl distributor operating from an old rental building. These raids demand split-second timing and tight coordination, with officers breaching multiple entry points at once, often in tight spaces where poor visibility gives suspects the upper hand. However, that day, Mercado's usual partner had called out sick, leaving her assigned to solo rear containment. The risk was noted, but minutes were tight. At 7:45 in the evening, as the front door blew open, suspect Kareem Douglas, 33, ran toward the back exit. Mercado was positioned in the alley, weapon drawn. He froze in the threshold, hands raised, a black backpack slipping from his shoulder. Her body cam showed her advancing steadily, maintaining proper stance, then holstering her weapon to reach for flex cuffs. The instant her hand left the grip, the danger shifted. At that moment, Douglas lunged. Taped inside the backpack's top flap was a compact pistol. He ripped it free and fired the first round. The muzzle flash lit the alley for an instant, point blank and sudden. The second shot slammed into the center of her vest, forcing her a step back as her stance broke under the impact. The third round struck high, threading through the soft gap above her collar plate and entering her throat. Her knees buckled immediately. She hit the ground gasping, one hand struggling for her radio, the other pressed weakly against her neck as dark blood spilled fast. Her body cam caught her crawling behind a dumpster, dragging herself inches at a time. She whispered help twice as the suspect ran away. Then silence. Backup reached her within seconds and tried to stop the bleeding. She was still breathing when they loaded her in, but she bled out before they even reached the ER. Douglas was shot and killed at the scene, dropped by 2 rounds from officers clearing the rear. Internal Affairs ruled Mercado's death preventable, citing tactical separation error and miscommunication over apartment layout. The local department updated rear containment policies, now requiring 2 officer teams for all multi-directional entries. At her funeral, officers from across the city stood in formation, while family and neighbors filled the pews in quiet remembrance. A mural of Leanne was painted outside the 3rd precinct by local teens who'd known her from community outreach. It was March 19, 2018. Just after 5 p.m., Baton Rouge skies were thick with pressure. It had rained for 18 straight hours, turning River Road into a deceptively still sheet of water. Deputy Evan Lee keyed his mic once to report he was en route and turned onto the flooded shoulder in his parish-issued Explorer, unaware that the shallow detour ahead would lead him straight into the depths. Evan Lee, 41, had worked disaster response for 12 years, specializing in high-water rescue operations. A Plaquemine native who'd lived through Hurricane Katrina's worst. He wasn't just a responder, he'd helped draft flood evacuation models. Water rescues demand split-second choices as deputies face fast currents, hidden debris, and shifting conditions. Knowing any delay can cost lives, including their own. Friends described him as dependable, unflinching, and practical. At home, he was a father of 2 known for making weather jokes during hurricane briefings. The 911 call came at 4:48 p.m. A car had stalled near the levee breach at Bayou Fountain, water rising to the windows with a panicked mother and 5-year-old trapped inside. Lee was already patrolling nearby. He requested water rescue backup but arrived before the boat team deployed, the woman's screams audible over pounding rain. He didn't know the car was already shifting. Dashcam footage shows Lee exiting his SUV into waist-high water, grabbing only a Halligan bar, a forcible entry tool, and seatbelt cutter. He waded 30 feet toward the stranded Tahoe, current tugging at his gear. The woman clutched the steering wheel through her cracked window. He shouted instructions, but a new surge, caused by secondary levee fracture upstream, hit before he could open the door. A bystander filming from a raised porch captured the next 30 seconds. The Tahoe shifted, lifted by swirling current. The impact drove the frame sideways with crushing force. Deputy Lee, mid-step and still gripping the Halligan bar, was pinned waist-deep between the SUV's crumpled front end and the rusted post. His scream was short, high-pitched, and then suddenly cut off. The video caught a blur of movement, his shoulders buckling, his grip loosening, then nothing but churning brown water. The SUV rocked again and began to drift, its rear end swinging with the current. Lee never resurfaced. The Lee's backup rescue arrived immediately after 20 minutes and were informed by bystanders. The crew searched for him all night, and 6 hours later, they found his body half a mile downriver, caught under tangled debris. The mother and child survived, pulled to safety by neighbors using an inflatable kayak. Both were treated for hypothermia and minor injuries. Both survivors later visited Lee's funeral as a silent thank you. Aside from them, his burial was attended by dozens of deputies standing in soaked uniforms as bagpipes played beneath overcast skies. The sheriff's office launched a regional hydrology hazards program, now requiring training for all parish first responders. It was May 2, 2017. By midday, the heat in northwest Fresno had settled in heavily. A quiet cul-de-sac had turned into a lockdown zone. Squad cars at odd angles, rifles aimed at one house. Officer Raymond Kwan stepped into view at 1:47 p.m. The call started as a crisis negotiation, but ended as one of the worst police fatalities in Fresno's history. Raymond Kwan, 38, was a 10-year veteran and one of the city's most experienced crisis negotiators. Born in Oakland to Chinese immigrants, he'd served 5 years in the Navy before graduating top of his academy class. Kwan wasn't loud or traditionally tactical. He was known for his ability to listen. Crisis negotiation requires officers to make split-second decisions about tone, approach, and positioning, where one wrong move can turn tense standoffs into deadly ones. Over his career, he'd coaxed dozens of people down from bridges, weapons out of hands, lives back into fragile alignment. The man inside was Staff Sergeant Caleb Morrigan, 42, with documented PTSD, alcohol dependency, and a 2014 suicide attempt. Kwan had interacted with him before, helping connect his family with temporary shelter. That connection was why Kwan was called that afternoon. Dispatch believed the family had fled after an early altercation, and thermal imaging didn't detect multiple bodies. Kwan wasn't issued a shield, just vest and helmet, choosing not to carry his rifle, approaching with palms open. Helmet footage shows Kwan crossing the lawn, calmly identifying himself and saying he wasn't there to hurt Caleb, just to talk. He believed familiarity would calm the situation. It didn't. He just reached the porch when the door snapped open. A 12-gauge shotgun blast struck Kwan square in the chest plate, spinning him to one knee. He gasped, stumbled, and reached for cover, but the second shot was already chambered. The next round tore through his shoulder as he crawled, too slow, too exposed, and still calling out Caleb's name. The final one hit his head. His helmet split open on impact. Kwan collapsed face down on the concrete, groaning, blood spreading fast. He seized briefly, then went still. Officers couldn't approach for nearly 3 hours while Morrigan remained armed and volatile. Eventually, the man surrendered without further violence. The wife and children had never left. They'd been locked in a back room, terrified. Kwan was recovered where he fell, leaving in a body bag. Kwan's funeral was held 4 days later at St. Peter's Cathedral. Among mourners was the very family he'd once helped relocate. In the weeks that followed, internal review revealed that outdated threat assessments and insufficient equipment protocols had placed Kwan at unnecessary risk. His department mandated layered negotiation teams, updated risk assumptions, and trauma-informed tactics units. It was August 14, 2018. Heat clung to South Loop Towers as sweat pooled beneath body armor. Officer Jalen Myrick and his partner took the elevator of a high-rise on Roosevelt and Clark, responding to what dispatch listed as the 14th floor. It would be a deadly wrong address mistake with lasting fallout. At just 25, Jalen Myrick was a recent academy graduate, barely a year on the job. He'd grown up in Roseland, a neighborhood shaped by crime and resilience. His mother worked 2 jobs. His older brother had spent time inside. Jalen took a different route. Driven, quiet, meticulous. He was known for squaring his badge every morning, making it sit level. The 911 call came from a tenant on the 12th floor reporting screams and possible assault. Domestic violence calls require officers to manage high-risk emotional situations where quick judgment and tactical awareness can mean the difference between de-escalation and deadly force. Myrick's training officers described him as deliberate, someone who scanned the whole scene before acting. But there was a mishap this time. Due to a computer-aided dispatch system error, an ongoing issue in that building, units were incorrectly directed to the 14th floor. It wasn't the first time GPS had misrouted officers in the complex, but this time would cost a life. Myrick and his partner stepped out of the elevator at 7:42 p.m., unaware of the glitch. They didn't draw weapons. The situation was coded non-urgent. Security footage shows Myrick knocking twice on Unit 1403, ignorant of the danger behind. Seconds later, the door opened fast. Inside was a 53-year-old Mexican man who'd recently been robbed and lived in fear of deportation raids. He spoke little English. Seeing 2 officers at his door, he panicked, believing he was about to be deported, and his hands moved faster than their warnings. Without second thought, the man fired 3 times with an unregistered handgun. The first shot hit Myrick in the neck. He reeled backward, gripping his throat. His partner screamed and drew his weapon. As Myrick collapsed to one knee, a second round struck his abdomen, penetrating his vest below the plate line. A third hit his upper thigh as he tried crawling toward the elevator. Bodycam footage ends with blood pooling fast, Myrick gasping through a collapsed airway. His partner applied pressure, shouting for medics over the radio, but the blood kept coming. Too fast, too much. Myrick was gone before help reached the 14th floor. The shooter was arrested at the scene. An internal investigation traced the system error to outdated floor plan mapping in the dispatch system, fixed within a week with mandatory retraining issued for 911 staff. At his funeral, mourners lined the church steps in dress blues, many holding their hats to their chests in silence. Myrick's badge number was retired during the service, a gesture rarely made for officers so early in their careers. His story became a case study in internal briefings, how small digital errors can become fatal in seconds. It was December 5, 2015. A dry, brittle cold gripped the Kenai Peninsula woods, the kind that numbed exposed skin in under a minute. Officer Carleen Red Elk had volunteered to lead the final field exercise of a joint cold weather training between Anchorage Police and Alaska State Troopers. The drill was meant to reinforce safety under pressure, but by sundown, it would leave one officer dead and a department rethinking its protocols. 29. Carleen Red Elk was one of the first female officers from her remote Yupik village outside Nome. She'd joined law enforcement after years as a park ranger and wilderness guide, advocating for indigenous representation in public service. In Anchorage, she ran school outreach programs and helped design culturally relevant training materials. Her commanding officers trusted her with wilderness assignments others avoided, carrying both tactical skill and a teacher's patience. That day, they were training for the Arctic. The exercise simulated a disoriented response scenario. 3 troopers and 2 officers navigating a 10-mile loop without GPS, relying on topographic maps and analog compasses. By nightfall, only 4 would make it back. Red Elk, experienced in glacier terrain, volunteered to trail the group and film with a chest-mounted GoPro for future academy courses. Weather was within protocol limits, clear skies, -17 degrees Fahrenheit, no storm fronts. All participants wore layered synthetic cold gear and carried radios and locator beacons. But in cold like that, even Red Elk's steady pace and practiced steps could vanish without warning. Just before 1 p.m., while the team descended a snow-covered slope near a glacial runoff zone, Red Elk veered slightly off the packed trail, likely repositioning for a better camera angle. This would be her undoing. The shelf beneath her gave way in an instant, a brittle crack, then a thunderous snap like a rifle shot swallowed by snow. Red Elk dropped straight down, limbs flailing, her GoPro lens tilting skyward as icy walls blurred past. She hit hard, 20 feet below, on a jagged ice ledge, the impact driving her right leg into a fractured twist, bone tearing through thermal layers with a sickening snap. Her scream cut off midway, replaced by raw, shallow gasps. Her gloved fingers fumbled across her thigh, slick with blood, as she yanked a tourniquet from her kit with shaking hands. Breath fogged the camera lens. Her voice, slurred and uneven, crackled over the radio, repeatedly asking for help. For 6 long minutes she lay still, conscious but fading, surrounded by blue ice and silence. Search teams took almost an hour locating her beacon. By the time troopers reached the fissure and rappelled down, she was semi-conscious. Her core temperature had dropped below 85 degrees Fahrenheit. They pulled her out and began field rewarming, but she went into cardiac arrest before the medevac arrived. The chopper crew recorded her time of death at 4:38 p.m., just 12 minutes before touchdown. Her body was flown to Nome, where over 100 villagers and officers attended burial in a wind-swept hillside cemetery. The incident forced temporary suspension of field survival training statewide. A review found no negligence, just bad terrain judgment and tragic timing. Her name was quietly added to the cold weather training manual's opening page, just a line beneath the safety protocols. Her final GoPro log, clipped mid-sentence, was archived but never shared outside the department. Thanks for watching. If stories of split-second decisions, system failures, and real lives lost resonate with you, click here for more.